I've advocated a national health care system as long as I've served in Congress. Today, we take a decisive step toward that goal. This is not a perfect bill, but a good bill. The three committees have worked hard to address the needs of the people of my district and my own concerns, regional disparities in Medicare reimbursement that penalize Minnesota health.
We lost a giant last night. I talked to Gene about a half hour ago. I said to Gene, well, you know, Jim Oberstar died in his sleep. And I said, well, at least he missed the worst years of his life. And she said, yeah, right, I said that. She said, you know, he was vibrant all the way to yesterday. And just died in his sleep. And she said, I think this happened this way because he didn't deserve anything else. I just want to talk about Jim and what Jim means to be a public servant. I'm not going to be in the 8th today, so I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter saying that Jim was a public servant virtually all his life, served the 8th District all his life. Before he was in the House, he was on staff there. By the time he became chairman, and probably before, he was the most knowledgeable man about transportation in the United States of America. People about transportation in the world. The first time I saw him chair Transportation Committee, it was a hearing on high-speed rail. And he had called these witnesses from all over the world, from China and from France and Japan, and I think another country, Germany or something. And when it finally got to his point of questioning, I learned that Jim had driven every one of those trains. They all had high-speed rail, and he had driven every one of their systems. And when it got to the French witness, he asked his question in fluent, elegant French. It was a tour de force, which I believe is French. He was pretty amazing. I think I wrote in the letter, I said, if Jim was writing this letter about himself, it wouldn't take long before he would get into the history of transportation in the United States, starting with the Erie Canal, which was a state project. That was the state of New York, and taking us all the way to internet broadband. Jim understood what we understand as Democrats, as DFLers, that prosperity is based on three things: on investments in education and infrastructure, whether that means our ports, or our roads and bridges, or rail, or internet. He knew that. And on research and development. I remember the visitor center in Voyager Park was named for Jim, and I went there. And I said, he's going to talk about the history of this project, the history of Voyager Park, the legislative history of it, and he's also going to talk about the voyageurs. And some of that he's going to do in French. And I was right. I nailed it. Here's the thing about Jim, and it's the thing I cherish about Jim. He was interested in knowledge. Not just information. We have public servants who are interested in just enough information to get reelected. Jim could go on and on sometimes. And it was because when you talk to Jim, he had this knowledge that he wanted to share because he felt that everyone wanted this knowledge. He wasn't a guy who was fascinated with his own brain. He was fascinated by what he had learned. by the way things work. He wanted to figure out how things work. That's what a good public servant is about. That's what this job is about to me. That's what all our public servants' jobs should really be about, is trying to figure out how do things work and solve problems, how to do that. And that was Jim. Jim was a shining example of that. I can't believe he's not going to be there when I'm back in D.C. He and Gene have a house in Maryland. And I would call on him for knowledge and advice. And he was vibrant. I mean, he understood the importance of bike trails. He understood the importance. He said, let's go from a hydrocarbon transportation system to a carbohydrate transportation system. We were all blessed to have this guy. Not just the 8th, not just Minnesota, not just the country, but the world was blessed by having Jim Oberstar. We were really privileged. And what a great family man. He and Gene both lost the loves of their life and found each other. I'm sad today, but I'm so grateful to have known Jim. And I think we ought to be grateful